Okay, so you've been in the government for 10 years as an MP and as parliamentary secretary, and the problems at Canada Post didn't appear just yesterday. So why, I just don't understand, why just now sound the alarm? When Canadians are wondering if everyone at the table saw warning lights flashing, why did it take a decade for anyone in the cabinet to grab the wheel?
Yeah, well, on this, I'd say as I've highlighted, the reality has changed over the last 10 years. And, you know, if you look back 10 years ago when the moratorium on community mailboxes was imposed, the volume of letter mail was not the same. The financial situation of Canada Post was not the same. And I think now more than ever, these changes are warranted to put the corporation on a more sustainable financial footing. And as I've mentioned, in hindsight, if you look back, I think these changes were warranted in many instances, and I think it's good that we're moving forward now. And I'm glad that I'm part of a government that's willing to make the difficult decisions, show political courage, and move forward with these changes that we've announced on September 25th.
I don't want to run out of time. I have one question actually for Ms. Reza. So our committee recently reviewed the Ombuds's bait and switch report, and it raised some tough questions. So we've since heard that PSPC is changing how contracts are awarded, so moving from task-based system to more focused on corporate capacity. And that's a big shift, and people are very concerned. They're worried that what it means for fairness and outcomes. Would you be willing to return to committee so we can take a closer look at those changes together and make sure Canadians are getting real value for their money?
Sorry, I'll stop the clock. Point of order. Oh. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if we are straying off the topic of today's meeting being Canada Post.
We always allow very wide latitude, wide berth for questions, so I'm fine with it. We'll restart the clock. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the invitation. As it happens, I'm coming back to committee next week, and I will be staying for an additional hour. So perhaps if that worked for the committee, and otherwise at your convenience, we'd be happy to come back and talk about some of the changes, why we're putting them in, and from a vendor performance management, how it's going to work with SMEs. Thank you.
And I'm coming back as well, so please feel free to send us your questions in advance, and we'll be well prepared.
Do I have time? Or?
Yeah, 55 seconds.
Okay, so real quick, just leadership means acting before a crisis, not after. And so after 10 years in and around the cabinet table, I guess we're wondering why should Canadians believe that suddenly today there's the political will to fix the problem that your government helped to create?
As I've mentioned, the reality has changed and the world has evolved, and I think the pandemic accelerated much of those changes that we're discussing today, whether it's the decline in letter mail volume, the digitalization of our lives, and I think that, warrants the changes that we've announced on September 25th. And I would also argue that and thank William Kaplan for his report, which I think is a very thorough report and outlines the immediate steps that need to be taken to stabilize the financial situation at Canada Post. And I'm proud to be part of a government that's moving forward with with the recommendations in the Kaplan report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for being here. I'm just wondering, did you have a chance to ever read and go over the 2017 report by this very committee?
Thank you very much for the question. There's been numerous reports on Canada Post and its future, so I've looked at many of them. I wouldn't say necessarily with the same detail that perhaps members of this committee have, but I did look at all the reports, and I will highlight that in the Kaplan report on which we base the changes that we've announced on September 25th, the Commissioner has looked at all the reports, and in fact there's one part of the Kaplan report which is titled Studied to Death. I mean, the future of Canada Post has been studied over and over again, and by this committee, which I thank for the work, but also by other institutions and organizations over the years, and that has informed the decisions that we made to move forward with the transformation of Canada Post.
Okay, so recommendation number 1 from the 2017 report is Canada Post be maintained as a universal public service for all Canadians and conduct its operations on a self-sustaining financial basis while ensuring that profits generated are reinvested within the corporation. What went so wrong?
I think I've touched on it in my remarks, and what we see with Canada Post, we see across the world with different postal services where the volume of letter mail has declined substantially over the years. 5.5 billion 20 years ago to 2.2 billion. And what has been, I'd say the anchor for Canada Post is that it's got a monopoly on delivering letter mail. It's been the way that Canada Post has attained profitability over many years. However, as we've seen the decline in letter mail volume, as well as the rising number in addresses where it needs to be delivered, I think that accounts for what went wrong, to answer your question. But I would also add, and it's highlighted in the Kaplan report, that the organization has become too big for the volume that it needs to deliver, and it's been constrained.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to cut you off there just because, as you know, we only have limited time. Recommendation 15, that Canada Post continue investing in the growth of its parcel e-commerce services, which provide needed infrastructure for Canadian businesses. You did highlight that Canadians are largely choosing other providers for parcels, and I'll note that one of them is even owned by Canada Post. So how on earth could Canada Post not figure it out when one of their own subsidiaries is a profitable money-making company, and yet they can't even take that as a model and implement it for their own to be able to make money? Why is it like why is, when there's been so many recommendations, so many studies, so many reports, and I think a big emphasis has been on parcels and identifying that would be a path forward for them, and yet nothing's been done to address that for 10 years. Why is that?
Well, I would suggest we are moving forward. The Kaplan report highlights some of what you've just mentioned, and in order for Canada Post to be competitive in the parcel business, it needs to be more agile, more flexible, and there are some things on which we as a government can do, and by that I mean lifting the rural moratorium, lifting the moratorium on community mailboxes, which is what we're doing, changing the delivery standard, which we are doing, changing the way we increase the stamp rate in this country. But there are things on which we don't have power, and that would be the collective agreements, and that has to be achieved at the bargaining table. And I'm hoping that both parties, given the dire financial situation that Canada Post is in, will find an agreement by virtue of which Canada Post will be able to be competitive going forward in the parcel business, and reach a path towards financial sustainability.
Well, I mean, why wait until they're in the middle of job action? I mean, it's gotten to the point, it's gotten so bad. It's not like this year and last year was the first years that they were losing hundreds of millions of dollars, right? I mean, it was pretty evident for even like years before COVID even hit. It was evident that this was the pathway that this was going down. So why was it delayed up until this point when it's the middle of a job action, and at a point where you even admitted in your opening remarks that as a company they're basically insolvent? So why wait so long to actually implement a plan on the future of Canada Post? Why?
Well, I think when you look at the evolution, if you look back at, for instance, when the moratorium was imposed on the implementation of community mailboxes 10 years ago, the financial situation of Canada Post was not the same. Hindsight, it probably should have gone forward. I agree with you on this. And however, I would argue that given that for the first time the federal government had to invest or inject $1 billion just to keep the lights on at Canada Post, and that in the foreseeable future the government will, at the pace at which it's losing money right now, we would, without any changes, would be in repeated bailouts. I think that warranted change and beginning the transformation of Canada Post, which is what we're doing, and I'm proud that we're taking that responsible decision.
So what political considerations went into you guys not implementing the plan until the 11th hour?
Listen, I've been minister for not even 6 months now, but
You've been an MP for 10 years, though. You've been in the government for the duration of the time.
I think when you look at the evolution, which is what I've highlighted, where in 2024, for this year, we've had to inject $1 billion, where Canada Post just had this summer its worst quarter in history. I think it warranted the changes to transform Canada Post, and I think Canadians are generally on board with the changes we've announced.
Thank you, Minister. Mr.